Hi, this is Trish with Decant Designs. Today we're going to be making this wall hanging. Some people call it a Carpenter Star. Some people call it a Carpenter's Wheel. In any case, let's sew. For this project, I am going to be making a Carpenter's Wheel wall hanging in Christmas colors for my living room. I'm going to be using the Accuquilt, the 12-inch, but the smaller size of the dies. And I have myself a road map because I've made a few of these, as you can see. I have no spatial reasoning. This is why I have to do this every time. So I've written down how many A, B, and C colors I need of each square and half square triangles and the total of each. So I'll need to cut 32A, 32B, 32C, and then A and C half square triangles, 16 of those, B and C 16, and A and B. To get the width of the strips that you need to fit on here, just measure the inside of right at the side of where the razors are here. So this one is 3.5 inches, and this one is about, well, just under 4.5, just under 4.5 inches, and it's 3 3/4 this way. So just measure like 4 1/4 and cut, which is what I've already done here. And then Accuquilt says you can do 6 layers. I only do 4 layers. That's just what I like to do. Okay, just as a reminder, the sticker side goes towards you. The salvage edge goes along the line of the sticker. Place your fabric on the die. Place the mat on top. As they say, slide, don't pull. And there you have it. I've cut out all of my fabric, and this is how much scrap I have left. And it literally only took about 10 minutes to cut 112 pieces out. So now I'm going to sew them together. When I'm ready to sew, I lay out my piles of A, B, and C fabric just to keep everything straight and have my mat. Next, I pull the first 16 of one color because I'm going to make C and A half square triangles. So I have 16, and then I'll grab the green ones. So lay them together and sew them. It's very, very important that you have a 1/4 inch seam on these. I'm using my Juki TL 2010Q, which is a 1/4 inch foot, which has been doing amazing. I love this sewing machine. Next, I'm going to do the red and the gold fabric. And now I'm moving on to the last 16 with the red and green half square triangles. Now I'm going to go through and cut them all apart because I sewed them just all in a row. And after this, we will press them. Next, we'll press them towards the dark fabric. Just like that. So I'll get these all done, and then we'll move on. Now that all of the squares are pressed, I'm going to lay them out according to the map. And when I finish with that, I'll show you what's next. I've laid it all out. And I also take a picture when it's all laid out to make sure nothing is backwards. And there was one thing backwards. So I'll show you that at the end of the video, how you can tell. So this is a good way to make sure you have everything straight. To get ready to sew it together, I do one row at a time. So I slide the fabric over and just kind of, I don't stack it all the way on top of each other, just kind of scoot it together. And then I take this row to the sewing machine, and we'll do that next. I lay out the row in front of my sewing machine and then just sew it together. This is row 2. Row 3. Row 7. And row 8. For row 1, I'm going to iron it all to the left. Row 2 will be going to the right. I just have it facing left right now. So I'm going to do every other row left, right, left, right. To start sewing the rows together, I do turn them over, nest the seams, and I will pin every few inches and sew the first row together. I've got the first 2 rows pinned together, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. This is a good example of why we want the seams to go left on one row and right on the other row so that they're flat when we get to them. Okay, now I'm going to press row 3. I'm getting ready to pin on the last row, so I'll show you all that. So I just line it up, flip that over, turn it towards me, and now I know most people put the pins in going this way. I don't. I don't know why. I'll just blame it on my left-handedness. But I just make sure all my seams are lined up in there. If it's not lined up, don't ever stretch the fabric to try to make it fit, because when you sew it, it's just going to go back together like an elastic band. So if you need to take something out and resew it, do that. Just don't stretch your fabric. Alrighty, now we're going to sew this last row together. Okay, now we're going to press the last row. Isn't that pretty? I knew something looked off. The label actually knocked the last row on the floor. So we'll do that next. Now for real, we'll do the last row. Why'd you knock that on the floor, sweetheart? All right, I've got pins. You need to scoot over a little bit. Oops. I know. Okay, now we'll sew the real last row on and iron it. Boop. Alrighty, much better with the actual last row on there. There shouldn't be too much trimming to do, but I do have some. So I'm going to straighten the sides up, and then we're going to make the border. It's not too much, it's just a little. Because this fabric is definitely directional, I'm going to make sure that my sides are going with the star points down, and the tops I'm going to cut this way so that the stars are all going the right way. The squares on the wall hanging are 3 inches each, so I'm going to cut the border at 3.5 inches. I've got the top and bottom border clipped on, and I'm going to sew them a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, now we'll press the top and bottom borders. And next I'll trim off this excess that I have on each end. Now I will clip on the side borders and sew them on. Because this is for a wall hanging, I'm just going to use some cotton fabric, white cotton fabric for the back of it. And I'm actually going to use the iron-on batting fleece for this project. I've never done this before for a wall hanging. So we're going to try and see what happens. So I'm going to iron this on to my wall hanging right now. Okay, I've got this ironed on. Next, I'm going to spray quilt basting spray on this. And lay the cotton on it. Next, I'm going to quilt the wall hanging, and I'm not going to do anything fancy. I like it simple. I can do the fancy stuff. I just don't want to right now. So I'm just going to quilt around some of the red and green, and I'll show you as I'm doing that, and then I'll trim off the cotton and we'll make the binding. So if I were doing a quilt, I'd probably be using my Viking with the walking foot. However, this is a wall hanging. I'm not going to use the walking foot on this. I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch seam with, I think I have like a gold colored thread. And I'm just going to go around and sort of fill in some of the areas. I'm not going to go nuts. I did all the points of the center star with the gold thread. I think it looks really nice. And now I'm going to go around the perimeter of the green and red, just a 1/4 inch all the way around both sides. I went around this part of the wall hanging. Now I'm going to do the perimeter, and I'll show you what that looks like when we're done. Okay, I'm about to finish the perimeter here. For the rest of the quilting, I'm just going to do between the border and the wall hanging part, all the way around the big square. It's time to cut the cotton off the sides. And I'll finish this up and we will start the binding. For the binding, I am going to use this Accuquilt die cutter. It's 1.5 inches for the binding. I'm just using a small binding for this wall hanging. So label's facing me, salvage edge towards the top facing the same way as the label. I sewed 2 strips together. I did not do it on the bias People do it on the bias. I just prefer not to. And then I'm going to continue just folding this in half and pressing it all the way to the end. Now for the binding, the final part of the wall hanging. So as you can see, I don't start at the top. I start somewhere in the middle, lay the binding, and then I'll start sewing 6 or 8 inches below that because we want to be able to connect when we end here to this where we started. And we have to have enough room on the fabric to be able to kind of turn it right sides together and sew it. So we'll start sewing this on. Okay, so I've got the 1/4 inch foot on still. This is not a time to be in a hurry, for sure. I'm not going to pin or clip it. I'm just going to line it up and go for it. Using the same color thread, the gold thread. So as you see, I've left several inches unsewn there. When you get to about 1/4 inch from the corner, leave your needle down, turn your project, and you're going to go, I have to take 1 or 2 more stitches, I think. Okay. And you're going to do just an angle up to the corner here. And then when you get to the corner and you're ready to start sewing down the other side, you've turned and went up on an angle there. So you'll turn your fabric up like that and turn it down so it's squared off, and then just start sewing here. Okay, and then just start sewing down the other side, right from the top. Okay, I'm going to finish the other 3 sides, and when I turn it over to sew it, I'll show you what to do next. I stopped sewing about 4 inches from where we started. Where we started the binding, you'll take a ruler and mark a 2-inch line. I'm using again the friction pen, and I already did this one because I thought my phone was recording and it wasn't. So I marked 2 inches and then I cut off the excess here. Then what we'll do is open this one up, open this one up, put them right sides together, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam right here. So where you've drawn the pen, and I cut this one off to meet the drawn line, open this one up, open this one up, and at the marked line, you're going to place the end of the upper one and sew a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to do a very small little mock of binding because before I thought my phone was recording and it wasn't, so it messed up part of the video. Okay, so we're going to sew across the top at a 1/4 inch here. When you get to about a 1/4 inch from the end, the side, leave your needle in and pivot and just sew up to the corner and then cut your thread. Okay, then you'll turn the fabric up, the binding I should say, and then down so it's square. And then we're going to start sewing here. And I'm only going to sew a couple of inches because this is going to be kind of how we join the side of the binding. For this mock binding tutorial with this tiny piece of fabric, I'm going to start sewing the binding a couple of inches down from the top. If this were a quilt or a wall hanging, it'd be 8 or 10 inches that I would not be sewing. But for now, we're just going to sew here and just take a back tack. For the next step on the binding, to meet the sides of the binding up, so where we started sewing our binding on and where we ended sewing our binding, we're going to take a ruler and mark 2 inches down from the top of this one, right? So we're going to mark here a line, and we're going to mark it on this fabric too. Then we will open the fabric up and place the lines together. And sew right on that line. Okay, I've got the lines lined up and I'm going to sew right across it. After you sew that, your binding should lay perfectly flat, and then you'll be able to cut off that extra fabric there. And now you can finish sewing the binding on. Just overlap a little bit where you left off from before and just sew the rest of it. So I'm just wanting a little bit of the binding showing because it's wall hanging. So I'm just going to fold this over and stitch in the ditch, and it'll catch both sides of the binding. And because of the way we folded the binding over, you'll have a perfect mitered corner there as we go around. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. As you get to the next corner and your binding is folded under, you can see that that corner is just right. Here's the finished wall hanging. I just love the way it turned out. I love the colors, and I love this pattern too. So I appreciate you all sewing with me. And as a reminder, please like, subscribe, and share my videos. We greatly appreciate it.